So, the planning system. Well, I'm afraid we're going to have to cover this because it controls what happens in cities but also enables change and, well, it's just paper, isn't it? It's just dull, but it's really quite important. So let's see how quickly I can get through this. Well, where did it start? 1947, government nationalised lots of industry and also nationalised development rights. So before that you could build whatever you want, wherever you wanted. After that, you had to apply to the state for permission to develop. So, we have this system then where you have the state says this is good, this is bad, yes, no. Essentially that system continues today. There's been reform constantly ever since then. Reform talks about making it simpler, blah, blah, blah. Other things come and make it more complicated. These key principles seem to exist generally throughout. The first is that government sets high-level policy. It says, you'll do this, you won't do this. Protects the green belt, build enough homes, provide enough employment space, support town centres, these sort of things. And over time that changes a bit, but government has that big picture view essentially. Then, government delegates to local planning authorities, usually the council, detail of what happens in the local area. They produce something called a local plan, which will be fronted by this, a core strategy, which is probably hundreds of pages of vague words about support the town centre, we want to see this, we want to see good design, and then we'll have lots of other documents behind that, some of which might talk about things like waste and minerals, or some may allocate specific sites for development, or we might have some like this, like a supplementary planning document that deals with the detail of one site, or another one which talks about householder extensions, building conservatories and stuff like that. And altogether this adds up to hundreds of pages of probably quite difficult to access guidance about what you can and can't build. So, does that say what you can and can't build? No. In our system, you should be approved permission for development if your scheme accords with that, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Also, if that says don't approve this, whatever you're proposing, but material considerations suggest it should be, you can get permission for it. So, what is a material consideration? Well, that's really messy, but it's essentially a damn good planning reason why this is good or bad. And that influences the decision making. So, how do we get decisions? Well, what we have to do is apply for planning permission. So if you're proposing a scheme, or if that's one house, say, or you want to extend your house, you will apply to the council as a planning authority for permission to do that. You'll submit plans, designs. You might apply for full permission, which is all of the detail, or for outline, which is part of the detail, or something between the two. And in your application, you will essentially make the case for why what you're proposing is good, why it accords with the plan, what material considerations are relevant, and why it should be approved. So for a simple thing like a house extension or for a single house, that should be fairly simple. There shouldn't be many documents. If you've got 1,000 houses, that's different. There'll be piles, mountains of paperwork talking about design, environmental impacts, are there enough school places, highways impacts, and all of that stuff costs a fortune to produce and then gets submitted to the council. And the council staff then look at that and assess that. And if they're not sure about things in there, they will challenge things and they will perhaps take their own advice. And they will then form a view. And if it's a simple scheme, those council staff can probably say yes or no. If it's not a simple scheme, it probably goes from them with a recommendation to the elected members. These guys, all the people you elect from different political parties, they're supposed to make their decision in light of this. Chances are they make their decision in light of what their electoral concerns are. So strangely, politics comes into the sphere. Then, if they say yes, you build it. If they say no, only the person who's promoting the application can appeal to the planning inspector. Independent, non-political, non-biased supposedly, they look at it impartially. You think, great, out of politics, unless it's controversial. Then the Secretary of State, who is currently this guy and in a few months will probably be someone different, then forms a view himself, recovers the decision, and then politics influences that. So, as you've probably gathered, planning is paperwork and politics. And if you want to change planning, you want to change what happens, you probably need to change the policy, because the policy influences what can happen in future, but as does the decision making. and politics underlies an awful lot of that. Unfortunately, an awful lot of our local politics is quite influenced by older generations who have houses. People who bought houses 30, 40 years ago, rather than the people who need houses now or people who can't afford houses now. Now, I am of the view that if voting was mandatory in local elections, I think at that political sphere, that decision-making point, you would probably get very different views and we might get different policy because the people who make the decisions, their votes will reflect everybody rather than a few people who currently vote for them. So perhaps we need to get more people to engage in politics and change this, and don't sit there saying we haven't got enough houses. You need to get involved in that and change that.